The school times for next year is transportation and the impact that this would have on transportation. So that's my presentation this evening, just to give you an idea of what we'll be looking at on the buses. And we have taken the time to do preliminary routing, so we have a real good idea that these are valid pieces of information for you. So we're going to look at it school by school. Start with the high school. High school structure currently has 33 buses transporting 2,052 students because the high school is combined with the junior high currently. So there's an average scheduled student of 62.18 for each of your buses. Under the new proposal, we'll be looking at 23 buses. But it would be 1,349 students, which is just the high school students, for an average ridership of almost 59. So you can see there's actually a few less students per bus. Now, those 23 buses, although have a few less kids, still has to cover the same geographic area as those 33 buses. So you are looking at some of the routes being a little bit longer. But to give you an idea of what I'm talking about there, right now you have 35 minutes from the time your high school buses leave the hilltop till the time they need to be at your elementary schools. So none of your runs can be more than 35 minutes long currently. Under this plan, they will have 40 minutes from the time they leave the hilltop till they need to be back at the hilltop for the middle school students. So you're looking at the high end, at the max end, a 5-minute increase. So it's not like we're looking at a major increase in time for anybody. The other thing to take into account when looking at these average ridership numbers at the high school is you've got a fair number of high school students who either drive or ride with somebody that does drive. So your actual number of students riding will be substantially lower than that. Then you go to the middle school. The middle school, again, currently you've got 33 buses because they're sharing with the high school. The same 2,000 students and 62 average ridership. Under this proposal, you've got two different structures, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. In the morning, we'll be looking at 21 buses serving 700 students for an average of approximately 33 kids per bus. It's 21 buses instead of 23 because in the morning, 2 of the buses will be taking kids out to Beattyville Technical Program. In the afternoon, however, you're going to have all 23 buses serving these students, but you're looking at 1,519 students. And that's because something we'll be looking at doing is taking the students who live in the Westview attendance area but go to the middle school, putting them on buses that go to Westview and then pick up the Westview Elementary kids and then proceed on out to bus stops. Same thing with the students living in the Highcliff attendance area. You take them and put them on Highcliff buses, which will go to Highcliff Elementary, pick up the elementary schools, and continue on the route. And there you're looking at an average of 66 students per bus. If I can get my little mouse to point at it. Again, some of your routes will be a few minutes longer. To give you an idea of that, currently you have, again, 35 minutes to get from the high school on your routes and get back to your elementary schools. Here you're going to have, I believe it is 45 minutes maximum from the time you leave the middle school until the time they need to be back to the elementary schools. So again, you're not looking at any major increases. So then we take it down to the elementary schools. And we're going to do Westview and Highcliff first because they're the ones that are combined with the middle school. Westview currently has 5 buses serving 378 students, an average of 75.6 students per bus. Under this projected structure, they'll have 7 buses. So in the morning, those 7 buses serve the same 378 students, taking the average down to 54 students. And in the PM, those 7 buses will serve 509 students, including those that are in the middle school. for an average of 72, almost 73 students per bus. So you see, even in the afternoon, it's a small decrease. In the morning, it's a substantial decrease. The other point to point out is that you're going from 5 buses to 7 buses, covering the same geography. Therefore, the bus rides will be shorter. Same number of bus stops, but spread over more buses. Now, last thing I would point out is the middle school students who live in the Westview attendance area, and they live close enough to the Westview Elementary School that they're in the Westview Elementary walking area, will have as their afternoon bus stop Westview Elementary School. So they'll go from the middle school to Westview Elementary. They'll get off as the elementary school students are getting on, and they'll walk just like the Westview Elementary students will be walking in that walking attendance area. Highcliff, very similar. They currently have 7 buses with an average of 67 students per bus. They'll be going up to 9 buses. In the morning, their average will drop down to 52. But in the afternoon, with the middle school students, their average will go up about a half of a student to 68. Again, the routes will be shorter because you're going from 7 to 9 buses. The AM routes will be less crowded. Excuse me. And again, the students who are middle school students living in the Highcliff attendance area and in the Highcliff walking area will have Highcliff Elementary as their PM bus stop. Ross Elementary currently has 8 buses, 511 students, so an average of 64 students per bus. They'd be going to 9 buses, bringing their average down to about 57 students per bus. Again, the ride will be a little bit shorter because you got an extra bus, and a little bit less crowded because you have fewer students per bus. McIntyre, same thing, currently have 8 buses, 64 students per bus, going to 9 buses, and 57 students per bus. Now, something that needs pointed out there is we need to understand how are we getting fewer buses, but we're having more buses at the elementary school. And that's because the buses that will be serving Highcliff and Westview will have sufficient time enough of them will have sufficient time to run their elementary run and go over to McIntyre and Ross and be part of the fleet for McIntyre and Ross. So you're getting those buses to do 4 runs: high school run, middle school run, an elementary school run, and then another elementary school run. So it's more efficient utilization of the buses, but the individual schools at the elementary level will have more buses. Now, looking at the cost side of the equation, currently our transportation costs are a little over $2.5 million a year, about 4% of our budget. We transport about 4,600 students to approximately 47 schools. And you think, well, we've only got 6 schools. But we transport to every private parochial school within 10 miles of our border, and there's a lot of them. So we transport to a total of 47 schools and institutions. We do that currently with 34 main buses, the big 84 passengers that we've been talking about all along here, and a fleet of 23 smaller buses. A lot of your private and parochial schools are served by the smaller buses, and those won't be changing. The bigger buses cost you $255 a day, or about $46,000 a year. Smaller buses cost $199 a day, or about $36,000 a year. We're looking at the potential of reducing up to 10 large buses, which has a maximum savings potential here of $464,000, down to a minimum of saving 6 large buses with a savings of $278,000. And the difference between the two is how many buses am I going to need to serve the private parochial schools. And since currently a number of our big buses are running private and parochial runs between some of the school runs, I'm not 100% sure on that right now. So it's a possibility that I won't have to use any additional buses for the private parochial, it's more likely I'm going to have to use a couple or add a couple to the small bus fleet to properly transport them. Yes, sir.
In an earlier slide, you're showing about the cost per bus per day. Is that to assume that that cost is the same whether that bus runs 3 routes or 4 routes each day?
As long as the total hours for the day stay under 5 hours and the total miles for the day stay under 75 miles. If you go over 5 hours, you're paying a certain amount per hour additional. If you go over 75 miles, you're paying a certain amount per mile extra.
The reason I'm asking is because when you were showing the elementary schools, and in particular I was looking at McIntyre and Ross where there are no middle schools involved. And we're using more buses now than we were in the past. And if this is a cost savings initiative, which clearly it is, why would we use the extra buses if we can save money by not having to use the extra buses?
Because they're already there. They're needed to be able to transport the high school and middle school students. So if you've already got them, you might as well use them.
Well, and that was my point for the original question, because if before they're saying that they could run, they're making 4 routes now as opposed to 3.
That's the main efficiency you got here. That's why one of the big things here is splitting the starting and ending times of the elementary schools. We need to stagger them so that you can serve one elementary school and then have time to get to the second elementary school and get the efficiency out of that bus.
But my point was that if previously we're using 7 buses, if we're using 7 buses currently for Ross, do we need to go to 8 buses if it costs us to run that extra bus for Ross?
But it's not.
That was the question.
Right. Yeah.
That was the original question.
Right.
Thank you.
Then lastly, just for additional information for anybody that has some questions, you can go to our website, and here on the quick link side you'll see 2013-14 proposed changes. Go into that and you'll come up with a page that gives you frequently asked questions and a number of other pieces of information regarding this, as well as the names and email addresses of people that are on an ongoing committee that you can contact with any questions that you have that they can bring to that committee.
Dave, any chances of some of the parochial schools or the private schools being picked up in runs that you're proposing, such as now that you're staggering the Ross and McIntyre and Westview Highcliff as separate, and I think they're staggered by at least a half an hour difference, if I'm not mistaken. 45 minutes. Is there any chance grabbing parochial students in there, putting them on the same bus as our kids and dropping them?
It's a possibility.
I mean, is that a problem?
It's not a problem.
Okay.
If it works time-wise, we can do that, absolutely.
It's just a thought. I mean, I don't know if it'll say buses, but it seems like if we don't have to get as many of the smaller buses, we may be able to have an additional savings there.
Your problem with your private parochials is their student population is spread all over the district.
Right.
Whereas you've got a bus that's going to, say, Ross, it's going to drive in a fairly constrained area and delivering its students. If it were to pick up some students at Eden Christian, those Eden Christian students are going to be all over the district.
Right.
So it becomes fairly difficult sometimes to do that. Sometimes you can do a program though where you pick up students from an area and you deliver them to a point where they get off of there and transfer to another bus to get to their private and parochial school.
Do we do that currently?
We do that for a couple of things. We do that for the Eden program out in Mount Nebo, and I'm not sure whether we do it this year, but we at one point did it for Vincentian program, where they get on their regular high school bus and go to the high school and get picked up by a bus at the high school and transferred over to Vincentian.
Do we share any buses with other school districts?
Absolutely.
We do.
And some of our buses take some students from other districts, and some of the other districts take some for ours, especially for schools that are a substantial distance away.
I know you mentioned the FAQs on the website, and I'm hoping that those are the result of the questions that are being asked by the PTAs and the different meetings that are held once a week, and all the questions and the responses are out there. Because, I mean, I'm sorry, Sherry.
That's right.
Because it's going to be beneficial for those people that have an interest in this topic, but are, because of their job situation, they're unable to attend.
And as questions are brought to members of the task force, and I see some of them are here, they bring them to the table and we answer them. If it's not something we haven't already addressed, then we add it to the frequently asked questions list and it gets sent out. When that's updated, that there's new information on there.
Yeah, I noticed there were new questions.
Sure.
Okay, I know that this is going to affect these school crossing guards. Okay, who sets up their schedules and the importance of the scheduled bus stops that they need to be at, and where does that money come from to pay for the school crossing guards?
School crossing guards are employees of the municipalities.
Okay,
They are managed and scheduled and assigned by the municipalities.
okay,
However, by law, we're required to pay 1/2 of the cost.
what happened to cost? Now, okay, so they determine the importance of the stops,
Yes,
and where do they get that information from? They get that from you, the importance of the stop, because you would be, I mean, the school district is the one that knows how many younger children we have and how dangerous a bus stop is, and the importance of having a school crossing guard at some spots.
we provide them with information on where our stops are and information on the number of kids at the stops, but it's entirely up to them where they believe a school crossing guard is required.
Okay, thank you.
Dave, in our deliberations, I know we have some various parent groups. Have the students been involved? Have we invited the students to make comments about some of the plans that we have?
I haven't been heavily involved in that side of it. So
We have not.
that's bad.
We have not.
Yeah, I'd like to suggest that we get some input from them. I don't want this to blow this out of proportion, but I do think since it affects particularly the middle and high school students, that we have two right here.
Yeah, we can see what Julie and Stan say.
But I would like to get kind of a cross-section of input, just to make sure that we're not doing something that isn't going to work.
You probably both drive, right? School.
I do.
I ride the bus, so
Okay.
we have a
Yeah.
I mean, Julie,
Cross
feel
section
free
right
to
there.
jump in,
Yeah.
but Stan, I mean, you're the expert here.
I mean, I think, I've talked to some people in my junior class at least, and, you know, I thought maybe it might be a good idea to have a meeting maybe with like our homeroom representatives or something, or even kids who want to show up after school or something and maybe talk about it. Because it would be nice for me at least to have some input, to come back that maybe just isn't my own opinion, but more of a collective opinion from everybody else.
What is your opinion right now?
I mean,
Or what are you hearing? Or what are what are the kids saying?
I mean, people seem to like the fact that we get out a little bit earlier, but then there's also the downside, we don't want to wake up earlier. And I mean, there's, I would say, mixed opinions about it. I think it really depends on who you're talking to and maybe, you know, what activities they're involved in. But there really hasn't been a general consensus on what the opinion has been overall. I think it's been kind of mixed.
Julie, I mean, you're up on the hilltop. You're a senior. I know it won't affect you next year.
Yeah. A lot of kids are like, I'm glad I'm leaving. I would have to get up early next year. But
Freshmen sleep in.
yeah. Yeah, I've heard mixed things about it too. Like the kids I've talked to, like they're like it might be a good thing, but I don't really. It might be good to get some kids together just to see, because I think some kids might have opinions, but they have no way of maybe.
Yeah, a key point that I think we're missing here, and I'm sure the students are, is the safety up there on the hilltop.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you guys know better than us what that's like when those buses pull in, either at the beginning of school or at the end of school, you've got, I want to exaggerate, you've got 70 buses up on that hilltop. 30? 70, I was close. I mean, and kids just running everywhere.
Yeah.
People to get out of school to get the jobs. I mean, now you've cut that, reduced that by 50% at least. I mean, just that alone, to me, safety is key.
Yeah.
But
Now, you had said that it would be a good idea maybe to get homeroom representatives together. Who is your sponsor?
Mr. Kane.
Okay, would that be possible?
Yeah, I know we've done this before. Dr. Banata can take care of that. I know that Mr. Crider, for a lot of things that we've done, have pulled students together to talk about different issues, different ideas, and different things that are happening. And if that's not planned, it's something we can certainly very easily pull together with a group of students and have lunch with Mr. Crider. I know that would be exciting for you. But Dr. Banata can take care of that through Mr. Crider, and it is a good idea to get their input. But there are a lot of things to be said about what Mr. Burnett said about the safety, and that's the thing that we've been talking about in this room for the couple of years I've been here, but the 11 years I've been in this district. And when we put 2,400 people on that campus in a 20-minute period of time, it's scary. And we've all seen it. You guys live it every day, in and out, both arriving and departing from school. And whenever we started to break this down, and we looked at what 23 buses looked like in that circle, and they fit in just the parking lot where the high school teachers park. So you're going to have students that are going to be able to get to the student parking lot without having to dodge buses, cars, get across that sidewalk, because you don't have 14, 15, 20 buses putting middle school kids out in front of the middle school, which is the reason you cross the street to the baseball field, is to avoid that deposit of junior high kids in front of that building. And it just makes that environment overly more safe, and we're asking for 20 minutes. There's not a high school kid I'm going to ask that if I walk up the hall and say, if I ask you to come to school 20 minutes earlier, you're going to be happy or sad about this idea. Very few of them are going to say that they're going to be happy about it. But there's, as I said to the task force, that when we make the list, there's a whole set of pros and there's a whole set of cons, and that's what we're looking at. What are the pros and what are the cons? Because we know there's items in both columns. So it's a matter of, and that's what part of Mr. Hall's presentation was tonight, is can we do this? Yes, we can. We showed you we can, and we continue to show you ways that we can do this. And the discussion that we need to have over the next couple of weeks is, should we? And that's an easy discussion to have with a group of students. I think it's a great idea to get them together and say, okay, this is the details. Now we know we can do this. Should we? And that's the question.
And Dr. Manarino, then would they be able to do this before our next meeting?
Sure.
And so that we can have feedback? Because when do we have to make this decision?
February 18th is the drop dead date for us to be able to pull off the scheduling piece at the high school. And that's a matter of, yes, we can do this, yes, we should do this, yes, we can do this, yes, we should wait. That's what we need to come to a conclusion of with moving forward over the next couple of weeks.
Because I like the idea of having the students' input, and you'll have your pros and cons too.
And we can have it so that their information can be brought to the education committee piece of the task force that we meet with. So I think that's the 30th.
No,
23rd. So we'll make sure that it's taken care of before the 23rd, and that we have a detailed amount of information. And maybe even if Stan, you want to represent that day, we can get you out of class for an hour and a half, and you can come down and be a part of the task force.
But we don't have any food.
No. Then we can give you a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
I would like to focus just a little bit more on the safety question and more from the perspective of the middle school. You think about the middle school students who are younger. You are eliminating in the afternoon 10 buses from that hilltop. But more importantly, you're eliminating the majority of your senior high school teachers' cars, the majority of your senior high school student cars, and you're going from 2,000 students flooding that campus to 700 students on that campus. And in a much more constrained area, they're going to be in front of the junior high school.
And right now,
So it'd be a lot safer for your middle school students. Sure. It's going to be safer for the high school students too. But the middle school is going to see a big impact.
with including the student drivers, we put about 450 vehicles on that campus in a 20-minute period. And that is what's drastically different now, because the middle school teachers haven't arrived when the high school students, high school teachers and buses are coming in. And as I said, the buses won't stop in front of the middle school entrance, they'll stop in front of the high school entrance. That's what backs up the traffic, is that first bus stop. Because it stops twice, it stops in front of the junior high and then in front of the senior high. That first stop doesn't exist any longer. So you also have traffic of parents dropping their children off, and it creates the massive gridlock that puts cars all the way down literally to Rochester Road. And it's a safety issue, and it's concerning, and this allows us to break apart that gridlock.
And you have the flip side in the afternoon, and that right now, and it's also one of the reasons why timing is better here. Right now, you spend a lot of time just getting off the hilltop. Your buses and your cars stand in lines trying to get out Rochester Road.
Right.
These buses are going to get out of that hilltop much faster than they currently get out.
Mrs. Reed?
I went to the education meeting Wednesday, and most of the task force was there, which is comprised of PTO presidents, and there was somebody from the Hilltop rep, and it was very informative. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the concerns that they had, Dr. Manarino has already addressed, and that was originally eliminating homeroom, and he's put homeroom back in for 18 minutes.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how many meetings you had prior to me being there Wednesday, but they're going to be meeting every Wednesday. So I suggest that any board member that has the time and concern about input to be there Wednesday morning, this Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock with administration. I'm sorry, I can't be there again. I have a doctor's appointment, but I'll be there the following week, because I know there was some concerns from school board directors.
You know, we should point out this time, which is a good point, Kathy, thank you for bringing that up, which I like is this committee
Right.
voiced their opinion,
Right.
came to Dr. Manarino, and Dr. Manarino said, okay, I agree with you,
Correct.
let's adjust the schedule.
Right.
So it's very, very open, we're
So
willing
then-
to listen, to champion.
Right.
That's that time.
It's not like everything's put on the back burner, okay. I mean,
Right.
he really is taking everything, your suggestions very seriously.
It's nice to see that we've adjusted already,
He is trying.
just some of the suggestions.
And would I be correct in assuming that the discussion that takes place will appear documentary on the frequently asked questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's sort of how that list is being built. As more questions get brought to the task force, and that's how they're answered.
That's a shame you weren't there, Tom, on Wednesday, because you would have gained a lot from it. I know I did. You know, it was very informative.
Yeah, because I just want to make sure that we hear from all the various components of our constituents, because, you know, we are changing times, so that can have some implications for working parents and things like that. And we obviously can't make all the accommodations that we would like,
Right.
but we can certainly give
Give it a try, and Dr. Manarino has. He's been listening.
Well,
Thank you.
along those same lines, I think it's important because the rumor is that this is a done deal with the board.
It's not.
And what I told the individual was, as far as I know, that's not the case. We're still considering all the options and.
I'm not sure it's a done deal with the superintendent. Really, I mean, it's an idea that we put out. We started to investigate it. It got some legs. We've been working on this now since right before Thanksgiving, and we're working out the can we do this piece of this whole thing. And as I said to the task force, it all sounds like it's moving in the right direction, but because we haven't hit that landmine, what out there are we missing that's going to blow the plan up?
Let me ask you this question, Pat. And I don't know the answer to this, but it looks good on paper. Is there any way, given the current schedule that we have with the high school students, that we can run through a dry run just to make sure it works?
How do you do that, John?
I think we have to trust the computer program, the VersaTran program that Dave has been using for how many years? That structures our runs, which is kind of how you're doing this now.
About 10 years.
About 10 years. So you're building it off of, you know, a transportation program that we've used to build our transportation.
Well, I'm not talking about the
schedule.
I'm talking about, well, okay.
What were you talking about?
I was talking about the scheduling throughout the day with the kids and the lunches and everything else. Just this. I'm thinking a lot is the problem here, but because we're gonna, if we do cast a vote and say yes in favor of this program, and then we do try to execute it, and there's some stuff that the Versatran program didn't consider, or there's other issues, then what do we do?
You readjust.
Yeah, I guess, my question too is are we committing to 1 year of this, or is it 6 months, a semester of this? What is the
I think it would be the next school year.
the whole school year, right? Okay. But we could still look, if it didn't work after 1 year, we could go back to the way.
Yeah.
Right now.
I mean, think about this. There's so many things that we haven't, I mean, when it was first brought to the board a few months back in executive session, we were talking this thing through, and I thought we covered a lot of the different questions and areas, all right? Then we brought it to the general public, and we found out how little we did cover, and they brought up additional questions. And a lot of the same ones, but there were some additional questions. My concern is that there may be something everybody's missing, and it's gonna be, it may be, I don't know, it may be tough to implement. I just don't know, and that's why I was asking.
The other thing, Jeff, is my understanding is when we have snow delays, whatever that is, they run on a similar schedule as far as the 4 minutes between period and the shortened lunches. So we have done that in a trial.
I agree with you, Tim, except for one aspect, and that is you have 3 grades over at the school right now, and now we're talking about 4 grades.
Right, but you also have 50% of the time where not 100% of the students are moving because of the lunch periods, the way they're broken down through the middle of the day.
And that takes care of the summer portion of the day. But
Also,
what about the
the first 4 periods, you have 140 or so students that are attending Baby Tech. So you're, once again, that number that he put up there, the 1339, is still less than the number of students we had 10 through 12 10 years ago. Moving the same hallways and the same pathways, it's less students. We don't have 500, 600, 700 graduating classes any longer. It's a smaller number of kids transporting through. It's the same number transporting through those hallways as it was before.
We're also going to have the more or less the classes sectioned in. I mean, you saw the plan that the 9th graders are going to be in this part of the senior high, and 10th graders are going to be over here.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine until they have to go to gym or woodshop or tech ed or someplace else where it isn't grade specific.
They do that now.
And they have, all I'm suggesting is, but I won't argue with you, I'm just trying to think a lot.
Look, I know it's going to be 1 minute less time, and it's also going to require you to move through the hallway.
There'll be no, you ought to go out.
There's less social time available by taking 1 minute away, and we all know that.
See, I'm not concerned about the mechanics. The mechanics we can make work.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the issue. It's the people issue. That if you now have a minute less time, are you going to move a little faster? I mean, that's somewhat insignificant maybe, but it's the people issues. It's the kids waiting at the bus stop early in the morning. It's all those sorts of things that we need to make sure we address.
Well, let me ask, let's go back to the student representatives, Stan and Julie. Do most students have enough time to get from one class to the next on a regular basis?
Yeah.
Usually, yeah.
Usually. What about unusually?
Well, what will happen, it depends really whether some students carry backpacks, some don't. Some students go to their lockers in between periods, others don't. It's really on an individual basis, and it depends on where you're going. But I would say a good majority, 75%, 80% of the time, people are getting there on time.
What? 75%, 80%? Okay,
It's a bigger number.
Yeah.
I was there for 8.5 years.
Okay, so why do students carry backpacks? Because so they don't have to go to the lockers. Mm-hmm. So they can go directly to the classroom.
Yeah.
Let's buy them all backpacks with the extra money then. Right. I mean, we're saving over $350,000, and we're talking about 1 minute of passing time right now.
It's not that hard to get to class
Yeah.
in time. I mean, it sounds like, oh my gosh, 4 minutes, but once you know your schedule, like, and you're in a routine every day, you go to the same place and you get there, unless there's some rare occasion where you run into a problem, but that's what passes are for, when you need them. But, I mean, unless you, like, are in the hallway hanging out, which
Right.
that's not necessary. I mean,
I'm sorry I introduced that example. It was merely an example.
no, I'm just saying, like, the kids who just know where they're going and go right to where they need to be are always on time. It's those few that.
Yeah. The first day, I would say the only day where people are maybe late a little more than they should be is probably the first day because they don't know their schedule yet.
Right.
Yeah.
But other than that, usually no problems.
And again, we
Went
can
from 80%
forgive
to no problem.
first week or so for being late.
Yeah.
I project in a few years, the book packs are gonna be a passe thing too,
Probably.
because you're gonna have, everybody's gonna have their iPads with them.
That's right.
Right. You don't have to go to the lockers.
Any other discussion on this? I mean, we're going to continue to talk about this.
Yes.
Dr. Manarino will be reporting back to us how the meetings of the task force continue.
Well, let me ask you this, Mr. President. When we do come down to a discussion before the vote, are we gonna, what's the format? In other words, are we gonna look at the concerns of the constituents and vet those on? Or is that gonna be, are we just gonna have these discussions like we're having right now and then?
Can I make a recommendation? If you go on to the internet, and I was fortunate enough to find out how to find it, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 pages of questions, frequently asked questions, the answers, and just follow through and read it, and then we can bring this discussion and come on Wednesday to hear, and if you can.
No, I understand that, but what I'm asking is the discussion that we're gonna have before we vote on the thing. In other words, we're talking about certain things right now, but it just seems like we get to a vote and we really never, it's like we've had haphazard discussions in the past.
Well, if you read this will help the discussion.
No, I plan on doing so.
Yeah, it's really good. A question was, how will dating be affected? And it won't be affected at all. I mean, there's, how will the private schools be affected? They won't be affected at all. Even someone still thinks, as asked about 6th grade, if we got to the middle school. No, it's not going to be about it. So, so this, I think, will assist us in the discussions.
I guess, let's put it this way, we have pros and cons, everybody knows what the pros are, we gotta think about discussing the cons and see if they're that important to not go forward with the program. It's probably what I'm suggesting.
And I'm anxious to hear what the
Wednesday
students
morning,
have to say.
and discuss it with the.
Yeah, but the thing is, Kathy, it should be the board itself and not just a subset of the board.
That's why we put tonight's presentation on there for this
Right.
discussion. We'll have a discussion again at the legislative meeting. We'll have a discussion again at the work session. And a discussion the night of the vote. So tonight was the first of 4 opportunities the board has to discuss this.
Right, but
And we might get there and say, look, we might need to wait here. Right now, it's been good momentum as we move forward, as we continue to go through the plan.
Okay.